Romans chapter 12, verse 1, we read, "Therefore, brothers and sisters, in view of the mercies of God, I urge you," some of your translations don't have urge, you have beseech, or you have appeal, or plead with you, "to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing," some of you have acceptable, "to God. This is your true worship." Some of the translations say proper, or right, or spiritual worship. The King James, New King James says reasonable service. Verse 2, "Do not be conformed to this age," most of the translations say world, "but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern," or prove, "what is the good, pleasing," or acceptable, "and perfect will of God." All right. This is a major transition point in the letter from Paul, and it signals the change. The word "therefore" signals the change from the predominantly doctrine portion of the letter, where he's laying out the truths of Christianity, faith in Jesus Christ as the solution for the unsolvable problem of humanity, and now moving into the application part, or the action part of the letter. If we were to continue reading, which we will, we're going to see a massive list of do's and don'ts in chapter 12. Now, most people consider Christianity as a list of do's and don'ts, of moral code to live by. And if you're going to become a Christian, you're going to have to do these things, and you're going to have to promise yourself and promise God that you're going to do these things. And if you fail in these things, you're going to need to get right back up on it, and you're going to do it. And the inference is that you would have to do this out of your own strength, or out of your own willpower, or out of your own promises to yourself, that you're going to have to get the energy to be able to do that. That is a total misconception of Christianity. That is not at all what's going on. What is actually going on, and what the bulk of the letter shows, is that faith in Jesus Christ produces inside of the human being righteousness. That righteousness is not just right standing with God, we need that, but it is also power, ability, energy, strength to be able to live the way that God requires. And so that's what's being laid out in the first part of the letter. We can't mistake that. The energy, the ability, the power comes from God. We rely upon Him for the energy and the power and the ability. But we do need to know, well, what are we to live like? What is it supposed to live? What are we supposed to live like? And so that's where the list of the do's and don'ts comes from. It's not out of your own strength. It's out of God's strength, but you still need a direction to head. And that's what's going on here in chapter 12. So this is very similar to most of the New Testament letters. Very heavy on the doctrine portion. What God has done for us. Smaller section. The way that we respond. The direction of our lives. It's like this. The power for the car comes from gas or electric or whatever. That's where the power comes from. But I still need the road signs to know where I'm going. Where's the road? Right? It doesn't mean that, okay, here's the road, and now I've got to figure out how to get my car down the road out of my own strength. Start pushing, Fred. We got to get this car down the road. No, that's not it, It's God and His strength, but I do need to know the direction I'm going. So this is a major transition point in the letter, and so it's okay for us to hang out here and just kind of meditate. I know that's different for us, that we don't generally take a verse or two and just meditate on it, but that's what we're going to do this morning, and then we'll get into the big list of do-dos, because we're hitting transition. This is a major transition point. There have been other transition points in the letter. I'll just refresh our memory. Romans chapter 1, verse 18 laid out the unsolvable problem of humanity, namely that mankind is living under the wrath of God. We've been disconnected from God. His ability, His power, His energy, His love, His comfort, His wisdom, His life. We've been disconnected for it. Causes all kinds of problems. Chapter 3, verse 21, it lays out another transition point in the letter. Righteousness from God is given to any human through faith in Jesus Christ. When we put our faith in Jesus Christ, righteousness is imparted to the human being, reconnecting them with God, giving them the ability to live right. Doctrine. And then the next couple of chapters, it goes into all the mechanics of how that works, logically, legally, historical evidence for it, all that doctrine. Chapter 6, verse 1. Chapter 6, verse 1 marks another transition in the letter. Chapter 6, chapter 7, chapter 8 talk about what it's going to look like practically in the Christian life. How does my life practically change? And the discussion is there about how it practically changes. Again, doctrine. The only action words in that section were: you need to know information. You've been crucified with Christ. You've been baptized with Christ. Your life is now with Christ. Second action word, you need to consider that it's true. You need to reckon that it's true. You need to count on it being true, that has happened. And then the third action point was to offer or to present your body and the members of your body to God as an instrument or as a weapon of righteousness, rather than continuing to offer our body to sin. That was the action point, chapter 6. Those were the three action words. We got to chapter 8, it talked about following the Spirit and being led by the Spirit. Again, the concepts and the ideas, doctrine. Chapter 9 was another major transition in the letter because he talked about the relationship that God had between himself and the Jewish people. If God has made these promises to us as Christians, can we depend upon God to fulfill those promises? Because we look at the relationship between God and the Jewish people and we see it's a mess. So it's kind of like, well, what happened? Who's at blame? What's the future look like for them? How's this going to get fixed? And so he kind of deep dives that in chapter 9, chapter 10, chapter 11. Now we're in this major transition point. How to live the Christian life. What does it look like practically? He says, therefore. Therefore. Anytime you see therefore in the scriptures, we've talked about this a few times. Anytime you see therefore, you have to consider what it's there for. It's like a big equal sign. It's like a math problem. A plus B is therefore C. And so you need to know what's going on before that in order to get to the therefore. What has gone on before that? He says, therefore, brothers and sisters, in view of the mercies of God. In view of the mercies of God. What mercies? The first time he talks about mercy is in Romans chapter 3. It's in verse 25. It's in one of those major transition points in the letter where he lays out the solution, which is faith in Jesus Christ. In Romans chapter 3, verse 25, you can look at it with me if you'd like to. He says, God presented him, that's Jesus, as the mercy seat. What does that mean? Jesus has been presented as an expression of God's mercy. If you want to receive mercy from God, you receive Jesus. God has presented him as the mercy seat by his blood through faith to demonstrate his righteousness. That's mercy. Jesus is mercy. It's in view of Jesus that he gave his life for me and for you to be reconnected with God, to be able to have the ability to live the life that God requires. In view of the mercies of God, Jesus. But that's not the only place that we've seen mercy. In many of us, as we were reading and studying through chapter 9, chapter 10, chapter 11, we were struck by the role of mercy in the way that God has dealt with humanity. People who have free choice, free agency. We read, and we actually had to do a little digging, went back into Exodus. We read how God used mercy, which we want God to have, how he used mercy to harden Pharaoh's heart. It was by withdrawing the consequences from Pharaoh's decisions and actions that God was able to actually harden Pharaoh's heart. What does that look like? Well, it's the same thing that a loving parent or a loving spouse or a loving loved one does to somebody that's caught up in addiction. By removing the consequences of their actions, many times they're enabling them to go further into sin, further into addiction. It's through mercy. You can't fault God for that, no more than you can fault the loved one for that, because it's an expression of love. But that same mercy that hardened Pharaoh's heart is the same mercy that has melted our hearts. As we see that God has initiated the reconciliation of the relationship. It's profound. Then as we continue to read in Romans 9 through 11, we saw that after Israel rejected their Messiah, God became and poured out mercy upon non-Jewish people. Many of us sitting in this room are non-Jewish people, and we have been the recipients of the mercy of God. And we're grateful for it, because he redeemed us out of a life that was totally out of control. And we're sitting here on a Sunday morning in a church, in a pandemic, with a mask on, because we love Jesus. And we're looking around the room and we're going, the only thing all of us have in common, the only thing all of us have in common, besides living in Ottawa, is we love Jesus. Isn't that remarkable? It's remarkable. We've received mercy. Paul says God pours out mercy upon the non-Jewish people, and as they are enjoying the blessing of God on their life through receiving mercy, in turn it causes the Jewish people to see that and become jealous. How come they're blessed? Which opens them up to mercy as well. And then Paul says God has turned everybody over into this way so that he can show mercy and to give mercy to everybody. So by the end of chapter 11, we're looking at the mercy of God, and we're with Paul and we're going, oh, who knows the mind of God? Who can be his counselor? This is unbelievably deep and beautiful and incredible. And I can't hit the end of it. How that God, through mercy, through the gift of Jesus, through his work with the Jewish people and the Gentile people, has opened up reconciliation with God to everybody on the planet. People who have the ability to make a choice, free agency. We look at that and we go, incredible, incredible. Paul says, therefore, my brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, his ability, his gift of Jesus, his ability to work with people with free choices, his ability to do things through you and me that we may not understand, but results in mercy being poured out to people that we love. It's pretty powerful. He goes, in view of God's mercy, the mercies of God, I urge you. Now, I read it. Some of your translations have a different word there. They have the old translation, beseech. Why don't we just spend the whole week, and everywhere we go, if you go to get a coffee, you just say, I beseech you, would you give me a tall dark, or whatever. I just use that word. I just think it's the best word. And people will go, that guy's been reading the Bible. Or that girl's been reading the Bible. I beseech you. I plead with you. I appeal to you. I urge you. Here's what none of the translations say, and you need to see this. I command you. Or I order you. Or I'm guilt tripping you into. Isn't that interesting? Jesus bought you and I on the cross of Calvary with his blood. He owns us. And he could say, I command you. He doesn't. Look at what the word is. I urge you. Jesus bought us on the cross and set us free. And he is urging, pleading. This is your choice. Now, it is not a choice without consequences. It's not a choice without obligations. It's not a choice without pressure. He has put some pressure there, isn't he? You're like, well, Lord, is that fair that you're putting some pressure on us to present our bodies? Well, let's think about this for a second. He says, I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. So he urges us to present. Now, that's not a new idea for Paul, to present your body as a living sacrifice. Remember, back in chapter 6, that was the antidote to sin. Was to no longer present your body or to offer your body as an instrument of sin or of wickedness. He says, no. Instead, present your body and the members of your body as an instrument or a weapon of righteousness. So the way to get out of drugs is to no longer present your body to sin, but present your body to righteousness. It's hard to do meth if you're raking up the widow's leaves next door to your house. It's hard to have your mouth filled with gossip and slander if it's filled with praying or singing or praising God or being grateful. Christianity is not like, okay, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this. No, I don't have any time to do that because I'm doing this. I presented my body, very interesting, to God. And you say, well, why is he putting so much pressure on this point? He says, I urge you, I plead with you. And there's this obligation. And consider God's mercy. Consider what Jesus did. He gave his life for you. Why is all this pressure on you? Well, because sin has got a lot of pressure on our body, doesn't it? There is a beautiful bag of European-style chocolate-covered almonds about 20 yards from me. It speaks to me, even from the other room. It's beseeching me. Come, I have joy. I'll give it to you. Take, eat. This is my body. I want to give it to you, Andy. Yes. You understand? Is there not pressure on the body? So, what we have is we have a legitimate choice. I urge you, present your bodies to the Lord. Very interesting. Very interesting. I remember, he says, you present your body as a living sacrifice. I remember we were at a men's overnight, and what we like to do on men's overnight was Friday night, we like to do worship and prayer. And just, not a real big schedule. Just, it's good for men to pray together. It's good for men to sing together, worship the Lord together. It's just good. So we were doing that. And there was a guy there that particular night, and he just really felt like everybody else was not really engaging the way that he thought we should. And so he went and kind of took the lead and kind of guilt-tripped us a little bit. Well, actually quite a bit. And he laid down on the floor with his nose right on the ground, and then he stretched out his arms, and he made like the perfect cross, and he had his feet together like this, and he was just laying down on his face like this. He had his fingers outstretched. He's just totally perpendicular to his body. He had his legs just straight as a rod, and his feet stuck straight out, and he was just like this. And you could just kind of tell he was kind of judging everybody for not doing the same thing, because this was just a really expressive way of surrendering his life to the Lord, sacrificing his life to the Lord. The problem is that that's pretty easy to do, especially when you're around a bunch of people that are Christians, and people will go, that's a little weird, but you're one of us, so we've all done weird stuff. You're with us, and you want to be the Lord. That's pretty easy in that particular environment. Very hard when you go back home and you've got to actually put feet to that. Got, in this particular case, he had a wife, a couple of children. This guy, it wasn't a living sacrifice. He ended up back in prison a few months later. If there was ever a guy that did need to present his whole body to the Lord, it was him, for sure. Do we need those one-time events where we are just laying it all out there for the Lord? 100%. We need those. But we also need to revisit them. We also need to revisit them. Say, I remember, I gave my life, I gave my body to the Lord. It belongs to Him. One preacher said, I don't know who it was, I don't know who said it first, the problem with the living sacrifice is that it crawls off the altar. And that is a problem. That is a problem. But in one sense, it's supposed to crawl off the altar. It's supposed to be a living sacrifice. It's supposed to be a daily thing. It's supposed to be an hourly thing. My friend Larry Gray, Larry made a big impact on me, actually. Larry Gray spent 20 years in Chad, Africa as a missionary. And one of the things that he would talk about and say, he ended up being the missions pastor at one of the churches we attended in Florida. And one of the things that he said, living for the Lord is like your life is like $1,000. And you just give the $1,000 to the Lord. What we want to do is we just want to give it to Him all at once. Here you go, Lord, here's the whole thing, But he goes, actually, the way it works out is you end up spending the $1,000 a couple of dollars at a time. The Lord, kind of comes along and says, well, how about this? And you go, all right, and there's $2 or $3. A few days later, $5. And a few days later, $1. And by the end of your life, that's the whole $1,000. That's the problem, is it gets spent in little bits as we're making that sacrifice. The living sacrifice. You see, Andy, what does that look like? Well, for some of us, it looks like cleaning. For some of us, it looks like changing dirty diapers. For some of us, it looks like getting up with that kid. For some of us, it looks like just the loneliness of the unmarried life. And there's the living sacrifice. For some of us, it's the working out into an apology. For some of us, it's the working out into making amends. For some of us, it is raking up the widow's leaves. For some of us, it's all these different ways. It's like, well, Lord, wherever you want my body. I want to be that living sacrifice to the Lord. This is the way out of the life of sin. Presenting our bodies as a living sacrifice. There's another way of looking at this. Well, let me say this first. My friend Larry Gray, he was part of a Bible college in Chad, and he was the homiletics professor at the Bible college in Chad. And so he was a very good communicator. He's an incredible communicator. In English, I can tell you every message I ever heard the guy preach. He was an incredible communicator. And he was also very popular as a preacher in Chad, Africa, which was predominantly Muslim. He was a very popular preacher for a couple of reasons. One was he was teaching the book. And so the Muslims had a high regard for anybody that would preach the book or teach the book. And so they would come and listen to him because he was teaching and preaching the book. They had a high regard for that. The second reason they would come and listen to him was because his French was exquisite. So here was a guy that was born and raised in Florida, which is not known for education, but he gave his life to the Lord, became Christian, gave his life to the Lord, and had this heart and this call for Chad, Africa, and realized they speak French. I need to go learn French. And so after doing his theological training, 4, 5, 6 years of theological training, he moved with his family to Paris and studied French for a couple of years to get his French up to where it needed to be. And so when he preached or spoke in Chad, they would come to listen to him because he was talking about the book, but they also came to listen to him because of his French. His French was exquisite. It was beautiful. It was great. Wow, it's a good speaker. But that wasn't it. In his community, he was known as the holy man. Say, how do you get to be known as the holy man? Well, here's how you get to be known as the holy man. He'd been abducted by Islamic terrorists, held, somehow escaped, made it back home. There was another time that the leader of the local Islamic militia there in his area came over for a visit. And the way he tells the story is he just was impressed by the Spirit to offer him a cup of tea. So they sat and drank tea on the front porch of his house while the militia is standing outside. And apparently, culturally, it was the genius stroke on his part to have tea with the guy. And so everybody's like, "Whoa, we had tea with him," that kind of thing. I didn't understand the whole cultural side. I did understand this part, though. At one point, they came back, and they were angry at him, and they were angry at whatever he was doing. They were angry at the Bible college. They were angry at what was happening there. And while he and his family were huddled under the dining room table in fear, this mob of 60 people just dismantled the house around them. And when it was all done, there's no more house. All that's left is this dining room table with him and his family huddled up underneath it. They walked out of there without a scratch on their bodies. Now, obviously, nobody walks out of that without scratches and scars and claws on their psyche and on their heart and on their emotions. It's a very traumatic event. But in the community, he was known as the holy man because he walked out of that without a scratch. And they couldn't kill him. Everybody else they had killed. And so when you wanted to go hear him preach, you heard the book, you heard the exquisite French, but then you also knew you were talking to somebody that was connected to a spiritual power. The holy man. You see, hey, what does this have to do with presenting your body? All of us want to be in the place where people may come and benefit from how great we are. But it's in the laying down of your body, it's in the offering of your body that you end up in theological training, that you end up in French training for years, that you end up huddled under the dining room table going, what in the world are we doing here? Why are we here? How did we get here? Or in the back of a truck with a gun up to your head and you're going, how did I get here? What's going on here? And the Lord's going, I got your body right where I want it to be. Very interesting that Paul says, I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. And then in verse 2 says, don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The body is first. The mind is second. Very interesting. I may not understand why I'm where I'm at, doing what I'm doing now. My mind catches up later. Is this not true with us as children? When we're 2 years old, we have no idea why we're washing our hands. Other than that there's this big person that's washing our hands. We have no idea why we're picking up the toys. We have no idea why I have to eat that stuff before I can eat that stuff. We don't know these things. We don't know why we're going to bed right now. We don't know why we're getting up right now. We don't know. No, we don't know. But our bodies are being manipulated, and then we eventually figure it out. Oh, broccoli's good. Especially when you're in your 40s, you're like, well, broccoli's good. This is not bad. This is good. Kind of thing. Well, hopefully in your 40s you realize that. Hopefully in your 20s you realize that. Broccoli's good. I'm digressing. The body first, because the mind then catches up. So that's why he says, you just want to present your body to the Lord. Let's look at this from a completely different angle. And this is an angle that I think we need to see. Look at what he says after presenting your body. Present your body as a living sacrifice. And then what are the words after that? Come on, church. Holy and pleasing or acceptable to God. Yeah. Now, without a doubt, there's some stuff that we need to do in our bodies and making them holy and acceptable to God. There is something that we can do there, for sure. But there's another angle here. And that is this. Every single one of us, and this is universally true, every one of us has a relationship with our body that is not always good. You see, Andy, what are you talking about? Each one of us has things in our bodies or with our bodies that we don't like. In some cases, we have not accepted. It is not pleasing. You say, Andy, what are you talking about? Some of us don't like our bodies. The body is too tall. It's not tall enough. The body has this shape that I wish it didn't have. How did I get this nose? This nose is terrible. I would never get this nose. How did I get this nose? How am I ever going to be who I want to be with this nose? I don't want this face. I don't want this blemish. I want to be thicker. I want to be thinner. I want to have different teeth. Some of us, I want to have a different skin. I don't want to live in this particular time period. You know, there's all kinds of different things that we have with our bodies, and we've rejected them. Some of those are aesthetic things. It's the way that the body looks. We don't like it. Why do I have this hair? I don't like this hair. Or for some of us, why can't I have hair? Like, what's wrong with hair? Like, I'd like some hair. You know, like, what happened? Why? You know, grandpa. You know, whatever, right? Then there are also things that are functionally wrong with our bodies. Why doesn't my body have the ability to do this? Why wasn't I given athletic ability? Why do I have this body that doesn't work? Why do I have this medical condition? Why do I have this genetic condition? How come I can't be a little bit smarter? When we think about presenting our bodies to the Lord, oftentimes it's in this sort of abstract, kind of hypothetical way. And we don't always consider that some part of us that we've rejected. Paul says, I urge you to present your body as a living sacrifice. And then look at the terms that the Lord gives it. Holy. Acceptable. Lord, even that part of me, pleasing. Lord, how could you find it acceptable? How could you find it pleasing? It's not. Lord, by any measure, it's not. I urge you to present your body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable. There's a fear that's with that that says, you know what, if I do that, he's going to take that physical defect. He's going to take that thing that I'm embarrassed about. He's going to take that thing that I'm ashamed of. He's going to take that thing I've been ridiculed for, I've been mocked for. He's going to take that and he's going to put it up on a billboard, and everybody's going to see it, and everybody's going to mock it, and everybody's going to know it. He might. He might. But he might also do something like what he did with Johnny Erickson Tata, too. And as she presented a broken body to the Lord. What do you mean a broken body? Well, she was 16, 17 years old, dove into the Chesapeake Bay, and when she dove in, she hit her head on a rock and was paralyzed from the neck down. 16, 17 years old. She's in her 60s or 70s now. Millions of people have been impacted for Christ and for the gospel because she offered a broken body that doesn't work to the Lord. I'll put a link in the recap. There's a man named Nick Vujicic. He was born without arms, born without legs, presented his body to the Lord. You can watch video clips of him on YouTube. Very powerful what the Lord is doing through this particular man with no arms, no legs. He's got a body that's broken. I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to the Lord. Now, does that mean he'll put it on the billboard? I don't know. I don't know, and you don't know. But I do know this. He considers it holy, and he considers it acceptable. I've been a pastor for a few years now. I've watched up close what the Lord does with people when they give that full surrender to him. I've watched what he does. As they've lived out that living sacrifice. Generally speaking, not always true, but generally speaking, the Lord makes improvements. And I've watched all of a sudden money and ability show up for dental surgery where there was no money before. And all of a sudden, beautiful, beautiful teeth. Well, whose teeth are those? Well, those are the Lord's teeth. He put them in. Well, what were you doing with them before? I was destroying them with a crack pipe. That's what I was doing. Look what the Lord did. Beautiful. I've watched him make diet changes, and all of a sudden they stick. I've watched health come into people. I've watched the stability of the Christian life do wonderful things inside of people's bodies. I've watched stress and strain and anxiety leave people and be a distant cousin, and joy be a close relative. And what kind of changes that makes to the face and to the eyes. I've seen the complexion change. I've seen the countenance full of joy. I've seen it go from where nobody wants to hang around them at all, everybody wants to hang around them. I've watched this. I've watched the Lord heal people. It becomes his body. He can do with it whatever he wants. Generally, that's what I've seen. Not always true, but generally, that's what I've seen. Just over the years, 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, you look back and you go, that was a mess. And then, now look at it now and go, whoa, beautiful. Amazing what the Lord's done. Right? There are some things, though, similar to what I was talking about with Johnny Erickson Tata, similar to what I was talking about with Nick Vujicic. There are some things sometimes, though, that the Lord leaves. Doesn't change. Certain scars, certain blemishes, certain parts of their history on their heart, their mind, just never leave. The Lord leaves it there. The best recommendation I've ever heard on that topic was from a man named Bill Gothard, who is now disgraced. But he had a brilliant insight into that particular part of the Christian life. And he said that physical defect, you offer your whole body to the Lord, and if the Lord never changes that physical defect, he wants to keep it. He chooses to keep it. He says you should change your terms around that, from physical defect or from ugly nose or from, whatever it is, right? You should change your thing from that. And instead, you consider it to be a sign or a symbol. He used the word mark, a mark of God's ownership. This is something that he has chosen to leave. And it's a reminder to me that my body belongs to the Lord. It's his. And we consider that a mark of ownership. So that when I think about that particular part of my body, the body that I've been given, I can consider this is the reminder that I belong to the Lord. My body belongs to the Lord. It's his. He can do with it whatever he wants to do with it. I hope that helps. I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. This is your true worship, spiritual worship, proper worship, reasonable service. Listen, singing praises is important. I encourage the people on Zoom this morning. I don't care if you're in your room by yourself. You need to sing. Maybe you need to sound like the persecuted church in China. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Maybe you got to do that, but you got to sing. You need to sing. It's wonderful to sing. Singing praise. This is a good thing. It's worship. Giving is worship. Financial giving is worship. It's worship. But so is also any one of these things that we've been discussing when the body has been given over. Sweeping the leaves out front is worship. Cleaning the bathroom chairs is worship. But so is cleaning up your room, for crying out loud. That can be worship. Doing the toilets at your house can be worship. Again, changing a diaper could be worship. Making a meal again can be worship. Submitting to your husband can be worship. Cherishing your wife can be worship. Living out the unmarried life to the glory of God can be worship. Under this definition of worship, with the whole body given over to the Lord 24/7, 365, hallelujah, sleeping can be worship. That's great. I'm going to tell my kids tonight, hey guys, let's worship the Lord. 8:30, bedtime. Let's all go worship the Lord. Listen, everything can be worship the Lord. Don't be conformed to this world. So you say, okay, so I present my body to the Lord, so what's next? This has been a lot of fun over the years to watch what's next, because there's that thing, okay, well, Lord, what do you want to do? And I love this. How does a guy get from Florida to Chad and, this kind of thing? Are my friends Dennis and Sarah, how does he get from Southern California to Ottawa to marrying, obviously, a British girl, and then ending up in North America or North Africa? How does that happen? How does that process happen? It's been a lot of fun to watch the Lord move and lead people. We were listening to Dan Schilke on Tuesday night at the School of Ministry. By the way, if you're bored on Tuesday nights, you should join us because we're having a ball. And this week will be very exciting because we're going to do the most juicy passage in all of 1 Timothy about women in ministry. It might be the most juicy passage in all the New Testament. We're going to talk about it this week. But at School of Ministry, we've been talking about those kinds of... We've had some very frank conversations about ministry. You ask anybody that's been to those, it's been like, whoa, we're talking about that. Yeah, we're talking about that. Well, we've also had some great guests. It's been fun. And my friend Dan Schilke was the guest this past Tuesday night. He was talking about prayer and talking about the will of God and how the Lord moves things. And he was telling a story about being a Christian school teacher in New Jersey with 6 kids with no money. He said no money about 18 times the whole time he was in the presentation. And he said 6 kids over and over again. And he says, how did that happen? He goes, if you think a pastor makes a lot of money, Christian school teachers make a lot less. And he goes, here you are, had no money. 6 kids, and he felt like the Lord was calling him to Canada. And he was reading in Jeremiah where he talks about, I'm going to bring you by way of the North Gate, which is why the church is called North Gate Fellowship. And he goes, I think the Lord wants us to move to Canada. How do I do that? I don't know. Obviously, he's here. His kids are with him. His wife's still with him. It's a miracle. His wife's still with him. But the kids still, and they got more kids. Anyway, and there's a church there. So the Lord is actually part of it. But how does that happen? How does that process happen? Look at what he says next. He doesn't give you anything specific. He just speaks in broad terms. Look at what he says. He says, don't be conformed to this age. Whatever you see the world doing, we ain't doing that. If this was the School of Ministry, I would say, whatever you see the Global Leadership Summit doing, in their adopting of business principles from the world for ministry, we're not doing that. Don't be conformed to this age, this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. What does that mean? I don't know how to live life. And so where do you start? You start with, I don't know. That's a great place to be. You say, Andy, that's a terrible place to be. No, it's a great place to be. Why? Because now you're beginning to lean on the Holy Spirit. And I love that place where we're just sitting and waiting on the Lord. Tell the people in school ministry, you don't want the Lord waiting on you. You want to be waiting on the Lord. You don't want the Lord waiting on you. You'll be waiting on the Lord. He's going to speak. He's going to talk. He's going to move. He's going to do things. And there is always that period where you sit and wait. It's great. Just have your mind renewed, transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you'll be able to discern. You'll be able to prove what's the good, pleasing, perfect will of God. You're going to end up right there in the middle of God's will. It's wonderful. Wonderful.